I can fix it. Zohran Mamdani helps a Muslim man after his cry for help. We have a dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and become part of our dream too. It was just after sunset when Kareem's old sedan sputtered, coughed, and finally gave up in the middle of Crescent Avenue, its engine rattling like a dying animal before falling silent. He tried the ignition again, once, twice, but there was nothing left except the faint smell of overheated metal. Kareem leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes in frustration. He had just finished a long shift at the grocery store, his back aching from hours of lifting heavy boxes. All he wanted was to get home, shower, pray, and rest. Instead, he found himself stranded on a dimly lit street with a dead car and no immediate way out. People walked by, glancing briefly, but no one stopped. The city had a way of swallowing small problems like his, leaving them to rot on its sidewalks. His phone's battery was dying too, just 2% left. Feeling a mix of embarrassment and desperation, Kareem stepped out of the car and said the words he never imagined he'd have to shout into the cold evening air, "Someone, please, help me." The cry echoed farther than he expected, bouncing off brick buildings and open windows. A few passers-by turned to look, but only for a second before returning to their hurried lives. Kareem felt the weight of invisibility press against his chest. It wasn't the first time the world treated him like background noise. His hands trembled slightly as he leaned against the hood, trying to steady his breath. "Ya Allah, what am I supposed to do now?" he murmured under his breath. The humiliation stung more than the broken engine. He worked hard, paid his bills, minded his own business. Yet somehow, moments like this always made him feel like he existed on the edges of everyone else's world. He checked his phone again. 1%. He opened his rideshare app, prayed for a car nearby, and watched the screen go black before anything could load. The sidewalk blurred as waves of frustration and exhaustion rolled through him. Just as he was about to give up and start the long walk home, he heard footsteps approaching, steady, unhurried, purposeful. Kareem looked up to see a familiar face illuminated by the amber glow of the street lamp. Zohran Mamdani, New York Assembly member, community advocate, and the man whose speeches Kareem often replayed late at night for encouragement, was walking home from an event, jacket over his shoulder, still wearing his name badge. Zohran stopped, scanning the scene. "You okay, brother?" he asked, stepping closer without hesitation. His tone wasn't performative or distant, it was grounded, real. Kareem blinked in disbelief. Of all the people in the city to find him in this moment, fate had sent the one man known for stepping in where others wouldn't. "My car, it just died," Kareem said, embarrassed. "I shouted for help, but," Zohran nodded gently. "I heard you. That's why I'm here." Kareem felt a sudden warmth of relief wash over him, a rare, unexpected sense of being seen. Zohran walked around the car, peeking under the slightly lifted hood before turning back with a reassuring smile. "I can fix it," he said with an ease that felt both comforting and surprising. "Or at least, we can try together." Something about the way he said we made Kareem's chest loosen. Zohran rolled up his sleeves as if he had nowhere else to be, no evening to rush back to, no title to protect. Just a man ready to help another man who needed it. For the first time that night, Kareem believed things might actually turn around. He stepped forward, hope flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Really?" Zohran clapped him gently on the shoulder. "Brother, we look out for each other. Now let's see what this engine is hiding from us." Zohran leaned over the open hood, the faint street lamp glow casting sharp shadows across the engine. Kareem hovered beside him, nervously wiping his hands on his shirt. He wasn't used to anyone, let alone a public figure, taking this kind of time with him. Zohran clicked his tongue thoughtfully as he examined the wires and the coolant hoses. "You smell that?" he asked. Kareem nodded. "Burnt oil." Zohran flashed him an approving look. "Exactly. Which means something overheated before it died." He tapped the engine gently. "Could be the alternator, could be the battery, or," he squinted deeper inside the machinery, "it could just be your starter throwing a tantrum." Kareem let out a weak laugh despite the stress. Just hearing someone speak calmly made the moment feel less catastrophic. You know cars? Kareem asked. Zohran shrugged. I know people. And sometimes, helping people means learning whatever you need to learn along the way. They both crouched lower as Zohran pointed to a loose connection by the battery. See that? Kareem leaned in, squinting. The cable? Yeah. It's barely attached. Probably shook loose over time. He tugged it lightly, and the movement revealed corrosion beneath. Kareem stared, guilt creeping in. I should have checked that. I should have. Zohran raised a hand to stop him. Brother, you work 2 jobs. You carry the weight of your family. Not everyone has the luxury of regular maintenance. The words hit Kareem harder than expected. He wasn't used to being understood so quickly. Most people dismissed men like him as careless, lazy, or uneducated. But Zohran saw him. Really saw him. Grab the water bottle from your back seat, Zohran said. We can clean this enough to get you home. Kareem hurried to obey, mentally replaying the surreal fact that a state assembly member was kneeling in the cold fixing his broken-down car. When Kareem returned, Zohran was already loosening the clamp with a multi-tool from his pocket. You carry that everywhere? Kareem asked. Zohran smirked. You'd be surprised how many crises in New York involve a stubborn screw. Kareem laughed again, the tension easing from his shoulders. They worked together in silence for a moment, flushing away grime, tightening clamps, resecuring the cable. Try it now, Zohran said, stepping back. Kareem slid into the driver's seat, heart pounding. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, hesitated, and then roared back to life with a shaky but triumphant growl. Kareem's eyes widened. No way, no way. He jumped out of the car, almost tripping as he rushed to Zohran. You fixed it. Zohran shook his head. We fixed it. The correction warmed something deep inside Kareem's chest. But before either man could celebrate, a pair of headlights turned sharply onto Crescent Avenue, sweeping across them like a spotlight. A black SUV slowed as it approached, the windows tinted and intimidating. Zohran's expression sharpened instantly, his posture shifting, not fearful, but alert. Kareem felt the energy change too, a subtle tension gripping the air. The SUV stopped directly behind Kareem's car, engine idling low and ominous. Zohran stepped slightly in front of Kareem, shielding him instinctively. Do you know them? He asked quietly. Kareem shook his head, pulse quickening. The passenger window lowered just enough for a voice to emerge, cold, rehearsed, dripping with entitlement. Everything all right here, gentlemen? The man asked, though his tone suggested he already assumed the opposite. Zohran narrowed his eyes. Depends on why you're asking. The street had gone quiet again, too quiet. Kareem had no idea, but the real trouble was only just beginning. The SUV's window lowered another inch, revealing the faint silhouette of a man wearing a crisp suit and an expression carved from suspicion. Kareem swallowed hard, instinctively stepping back even though Zohran remained firmly in front of him. We heard someone shouting, the man said, voice smooth but laced with something darker. Wanted to make sure nothing unlawful was happening. Zohran's jaw tightened. Unlawful, he repeated slowly. His voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it shifted the air. A man's car broke down. That's not a crime. The suited man smirked as if amused. Depends who the man is. Kareem felt his stomach twist. He had seen this before, strangers assessing him, calculating him, questioning his right to simply exist. But tonight, he was not alone. Zohran took one deliberate step forward. This brother is not a threat, he said. He's someone who needed help. And he got it. The driver's door opened, and another man stepped out, bigger, broader, his posture stiff like someone used to being obeyed. He scanned Kareem from head to toe, lingered a second too long, then turned to Zohran with faint recognition. Aren't you that politician? He asked. Assembly member. Mamdani, right? Zohran didn't blink. That's right, he answered calmly. And who are you? The man hesitated, not expecting to be questioned. We're security consultants, he said vaguely. Neighborhood safety. Zohran tilted his head slightly. Funny, he replied. I represent this district. And I've never heard of your operation. The men exchanged a quick glance, brief, sharp, guilty. Something wasn't right. Kareem felt it like cold fog creeping up his spine. These weren't neighbors. They weren't local safety officers. They were something else, something that didn't belong on a quiet Queen Street. Zohran placed a firm hand on the hood of Kareem's car, claiming the space with quiet authority. Listen, he said, this man had an engine failure. We fixed it. He's going home. There's no problem here. But the taller man took a slow step closer. You sure? He asked, lowering his voice. Because yelling for help like that usually means something's out of control. Kareem felt anger rise, trembling beneath his fear. My car broke down, he said, voice cracking. He only asked for help, Zohran cut in sharply. The tall man raised an eyebrow. People like him don't usually get help. The words sliced through the night air like a blade. Kareem froze. Zohran's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. They hardened, sharp enough to cut stone. People like him? Zohran repeated, his tone suddenly dangerous in its quietness. Before the confrontation could escalate, a voice crackled through the men's earpieces. Both stiffened instantly. The taller one muttered something into his mic, then nodded. We're done here, he said abruptly. The SUV engine revved to life. The men returned to their seats without another word, and within seconds, the vehicle sped away, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as it had appeared. Kareem stood trembling, breath shallow, fear and relief crashing together inside him. What was that? He whispered. Zohran exhaled slowly, his posture finally relaxing. That, he said quietly, was intimidation. He turned to Kareem, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. But you are safe. I'm here. Kareem swallowed hard, emotion rising almost painfully. For the first time in a long time, he felt protected, not by luck, but by someone who chose to stand beside him. And the night was far from over. For a long moment after the SUV disappeared, the street was swallowed in a suffocating silence. Kareem stood frozen beside the car, his breath unsteady, his pulse drumming like a trapped bird in his chest. The humiliation, the fear, the familiar sting of being judged without a single word spoken, it all crashed over him in a wave that made his knees tremble. Zohran watched him carefully, his expression softening. Breathe, he said quietly, stepping closer. You're safe now. But Kareem shook his head, wiping his eyes angrily. Safe, he murmured. They looked at me like I was dangerous. Like I was doing something wrong by existing. His voice cracked, and he turned away, ashamed of the emotion spilling out. Zohran placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Kareem, he said gently, what they did wasn't about you. It was about their perception. And it was wrong. There was no politician's tone in his voice, only compassion. Kareem leaned against the car, struggling to steady himself. I work so hard, he whispered. 2 jobs. I send money to my mother overseas. I pray. I keep my head down. And still, this. His voice broke into silence. Zohran nodded slowly, allowing the pain to sit in the space between them instead of brushing it away. I know, he said. The world is full of people who see a beard, see a brown face, hear an accent, and decide they already know your story. But you're not alone. And you don't have to face this quietly. Kareem swallowed hard. You really think it can change? Zohran met his gaze with a conviction so firm it almost felt like a force. I don't just think it, he said. I fight for it every day. And moments like this remind me why I have to. Kareem let out a slow breath, feeling the tension in his chest loosen bit by bit. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't mean to fall apart like that. Zohran shook his head. Don't ever apologize for being human. He stepped around the car, tapping the newly tightened cable gently. Listen, your engine's running now, but it's weak. It'll get you home, but tomorrow you should take it to a proper shop. Kareem nodded, wiping his face with the sleeve of his shirt. I will. Zohran smiled faintly. Good. And if you need recommendations, I know a few honest mechanics. The joke, soft, simple, was enough to pull a tiny laugh from Kareem, easing the heaviness in the air. The streetlight flickered above them, casting warm, uneven light over the two men standing side by side on a quiet Queen Street as if the city itself had paused to acknowledge their moment. Just as Kareem prepared to thank Zohran again, a new sound cut through the silence, a familiar digital ping from Zohran's phone. He glanced at the screen, his brows knitting. There's a community meeting starting in 10 minutes, he muttered. He looked up at Kareem with a conflicted expression. I was supposed to be there already. Kareem stepped back immediately. Go, he said. You've helped me more than enough. But Zohran didn't move. He studied Kareem for a long, thoughtful second. You know, this meeting is about community safety. What just happened to you? That's exactly what needs to be talked about. Kareem's eyes widened. You'd mention this? Zohran nodded. Not just mention. Address it. He then offered a small, reassuring smile. But only if you're comfortable with that. Kareem hesitated, and then, quietly, firmly, he nodded. Tell them, he whispered. Tell them everything. And Zohran did. The community center buzzed with the tense energy of people who had come expecting answers. Folding chairs filled the wide room, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the whiteboard at the front read in bold marker, Safety in Our Neighborhoods, Open Forum. Zohran walked in with Kareem beside him, both still shaken from the confrontation on Crescent Avenue. Conversations quieted as soon as the attendees noticed them, some offered polite nods, others whispered with curiosity. Zohran was a familiar figure in these halls, always walking in with notes, data, and policy proposals. But tonight, he carried something heavier, the weight of what one Muslim man had just endured under a streetlight. Kareem hesitated near the entrance, suddenly unsure. Maybe I shouldn't be here, he murmured. Zohran turned to him immediately. Brother, this meeting is exactly where your story belongs. As Zohran stepped to the podium, he didn't bother opening his laptop. He spoke from the heart. Before we discuss statistics or reports, he began, I need to talk about something that happened less than an hour ago. The room fell silent. Kareem shifted nervously, eyes dropping to the floor as Zohran continued. A man in our community, someone who works hard, someone who contributes, someone who matters, was intimidated by individuals pretending to protect a neighborhood that didn't ask for them. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Zohran's voice sharpened. And the only reason they targeted him was because he looked like someone they felt entitled to question. Heads turned. Eyebrows rose. People leaned forward, the tension building like a held breath. Kareem felt his throat tighten as Zohran's words echoed the humiliation he had faced moments earlier. And I want you to understand, Zohran said, gripping the podium, that what happened to Kareem is not an isolated event. It is part of a pattern, one we cannot ignore. The room's temperature seemed to change. Several attendees nodded slowly, while others exchanged troubled glances. A woman in the front row lifted her hand. Are you saying people are being harassed by private groups? She asked. Zohran nodded. Yes. And it must stop. Another man raised his voice from the back. But what proof do we have? Zohran gestured for Kareem to step forward. Kareem froze for a heartbeat, but then, with a deep breath, he took a shaky step toward the podium. The room blurred around him, a mix of faces and fluorescent light, but Zohran's steady presence grounded him. You don't need to prove your trauma, Zohran said gently. You only need to speak your truth. Kareem cleared his throat, his voice soft at first. My car broke down, he began. I asked for help. That was all. His hands trembled, but he kept speaking. Two men pulled up. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask if I needed help. They only asked if I was doing something unlawful. Silence draped the room like a blanket. Emotion swelled in Kareem's chest. I've lived here 10 years, he said. I pay my taxes. I work 2 jobs. I never caused trouble. But tonight, they made me feel like I didn't belong in my own neighborhood. His voice cracked, and that was enough. A ripple of outrage moved through the crowd. Zohran stepped beside him, placing a supportive hand on his back. No one, Zohran said firmly, gets to decide who belongs. Not in this community. Not in this city. And at that moment, Kareem realized this story wasn't just about a broken car anymore. The room erupted the moment Kareem finished speaking. Not with applause, though a few people did raise their hands in support, but with something deeper, indignation. A wave of frustration pulsed through the crowd like electricity. Several residents murmured angrily, some shaking their heads, others looking down in shame as the truth settled in. A middle-aged man near the back stood abruptly. This is unacceptable, he said. We can't have people patrolling our streets like they own them. A woman next to him added, and targeting someone because he's Muslim? That's not safety. That's profiling. Their voices were raw, unfiltered. For the first time since the incident, Kareem felt something other than humiliation. He felt the faint, cautious flicker of belonging. He glanced at Zohran, who gave him a solemn nod. The room wasn't just hearing his story, they were feeling it. Zohran stepped forward again. This is why we gather, he said, his tone sharp but controlled. Not to trade slogans or pretend everything is fine, but to confront the truth, even when it hurts. He looked around the room, letting his gaze land on each person long enough to hold their attention. Community safety is not about fear. It's about protection rooted in respect. His voice rose slightly. And no one here, no one, should be made to feel like their identity is a threat. A murmur of agreement rolled across the audience. Someone shouted, "What can we do?" The question hit the room with force. Zohran paused. We organize, he said. We gather information. We report intimidation. And we stand together so no one faces harassment alone. It wasn't a politician's speech, it was a call to action. And the community felt it. Kareem took a shaky step back from the podium, his legs unsteady. What he had done, speaking publicly, revealing his fear, sharing a wound that was still fresh, felt terrifying and freeing all at once. As he moved away, a few neighbors approached him quietly. A man with a tired smile touched his arm. You did the right thing, he said. Took courage. A woman placed a hand on her chest. I'm sorry that happened to you. And thank you for telling us. Kareem didn't know what to say. These were people who had lived near him for years yet never truly noticed him. And now, suddenly, they saw him, not as a stranger, not as a stereotype, but as a human being. The realization tightened his throat. For the first time, he felt something shift inside him, not confidence exactly, but dignity returning to its rightful place in his heart. As the meeting wrapped up, several attendees signed up for a neighborhood action list Zohran created on the spot. Others stayed behind to talk, to question, to process. Kareem stood near the doorway, overwhelmed but grounded. When the room finally began to empty, Zohran approached him with a tired but proud smile. You spoke bravely tonight, he said. Kareem looked down at his hands. I just told the truth. That's exactly what bravery is, Zohran replied. He placed a reassuring hand on Kareem's shoulder. You didn't just fix your car tonight, brother. You helped fix something in this community. Kareem felt a warmth spread through him, a surprising, steadying warmth. And as they stepped out into the night air once more, he realized he was walking a little taller. He didn't know it yet, but the hardest, most transformative part of the night was still ahead. The cold air outside the community center felt different now, thicker, heavier, as if it carried the residue of every emotion that had just spilled inside those walls. Kareem and Zohran stepped onto the sidewalk, both drained but strangely energized by the meeting. For a brief moment, the street was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows deep conversations and hard truths. Kareem inhaled slowly, letting the night settle around him. "Thank you," he said softly, "for standing by me." Zohran shook his head. "Brother, you don't thank someone for doing what's right." But before the warmth of the moment could settle fully, the sharp roar of an engine shattered the calm. Headlights swung violently around the corner, illuminating the brick walls with harsh, jittery light. A black SUV, the same black SUV, rolled toward them with unsettling precision. Kareem froze. The fear he had spent the last hour fighting clawed its way back into his chest. Zohran, however, stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between Kareem and the approaching vehicle. The SUV didn't stop at a safe distance this time. It cruised closer, closer, until it halted just feet away, close enough that Kareem could see the faint reflection of his own trembling form in the tinted glass. The window lowered slowly. The same tall man from earlier leaned into view, his expression cold and deliberate. "We heard you had a lot to say tonight," he said. The words weren't loud, but they carried menace. Zohran's jaw clenched, his voice steady. "You don't get to stalk members of this community." The man smirked. "Stalk? No. We're just monitoring." His gaze shifted to Kareem, predatory. "Some people draw attention to themselves." Kareem stepped back, pulse racing. "What do you want?" he whispered. The man's smile widened. "Just making sure you understand something," he said. "Talking makes things complicated. For everyone." He tapped the side of the SUV casually, as if this were a friendly neighborhood chat. "Best to stay quiet." The words slithered through the night like poison. Zohran took a bold step forward, eyes burning. "Let me be very clear," he said. "If anything happens to him, anything, you will deal with me, my office, and the entire city government." The tall man didn't flinch. "We're not the ones causing problems," he replied. "He is." He nodded toward Kareem. "People like him should know better than to make noise." The repetition of the phrase, "people like him," made something inside Kareem snap. Humiliation mixed with anger until it became something sharper, resolve. Zohran moved closer to the window, his voice low and fierce. "You're done here," he said. "Now leave." For the first time, the men inside the SUV looked unsure. Zohran wasn't bluffing. He carried influence, connections, and a fierce moral conviction that made him dangerous to those operating in the shadows. The driver finally shifted the gear. With one last glare, the tall man muttered, "This isn't over." The SUV sped off, disappearing into the night once more. Kareem exhaled shakily, only now realizing how tightly he had been gripping the straps of his backpack. "They won't stop," he whispered. "They will," Zohran replied firmly. "Because now they're not facing you alone." He placed a steadying hand on Kareem's shoulder. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." And for the first time since his car broke down, Kareem believed him. Neither of them spoke for the first few blocks as they walked toward Kareem's car. The encounter outside the community center had shaken both men, though each tried to mask it for the other's sake. Kareem kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the black SUV to reappear from some shadowy corner. The city felt different now, less familiar, less safe. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer, flickering uneasily as if they too sensed something wrong in the night. Zohran walked with a firm, steady stride, but his eyes scanned every street, every alleyway, every passing car. "They won't try anything now," he finally said. "Too many witnesses earlier. Too much attention on them." Kareem nodded, though the reassurance didn't fully settle. "But they'll be back, won't they?" he asked quietly. Zohran took a breath. "Not if we make sure they're seen. People who operate in darkness hate exposure." His conviction gave Kareem a fragile thread of hope to hold onto. When they reached the car, Kareem hesitated before unlocking it. The engine had cooled, and the shaky fix they had made earlier would hold, but the vehicle suddenly felt symbolic, as if stepping inside it meant returning to vulnerability. Zohran noticed his pause. "I won't leave until you drive off safely," he said. Kareem nodded, but instead of getting in, he leaned against the door. "Why did this happen?" he murmured. "Why me?" Zohran faced him fully. "Because you're visible in ways you shouldn't have to be. Because some people choose fear over understanding. And because ignorance has a way of dressing itself up as authority." Kareem exhaled shakily. "It's exhausting," he admitted. "Always having to prove I'm not dangerous. That I belong here." Zohran stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to prove anything to people who don't want to see the truth. What matters is that your community sees you. And tonight, they did." Kareem felt tears sting his eyes, and he turned away, ashamed of the vulnerability rising inside him again. "I don't want to be someone who needs protecting," he whispered. "I want to stand on my own." Zohran shook his head. "Brother, strength isn't standing alone. Strength is standing even when someone tries to push you down. Strength is asking for help when the world expects you to stay silent." He placed a steadying hand on Kareem's shoulder. "Tonight, you spoke your truth in a room full of people. That takes more courage than any confrontation in the street." Kareem finally met his gaze. "It still feels like I did something wrong." Zohran's expression softened. "That's the poison of intimidation. They want you to doubt yourself. But don't." The night wind brushed past them, cool and sharp, carrying away some of the heaviness that clung to Kareem's chest. Just then, a faint metallic clatter echoed from a nearby alley, too sharp to be coincidence. Both men stiffened. Zohran turned toward the sound, posture tense. "Get in the car," he said quietly. Kareem didn't hesitate. He slid into the driver's seat, heart pounding. Zohran stood outside, eyes locked on the dark alleyway where the noise had come from, his entire body alert. For a tense moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic. Then, another metallic scrape. Zohran stepped closer to the car door. "Drive straight home," he instructed. "Call me the moment you get inside. And keep the doors locked until you do." Kareem swallowed hard. "What about you?" Zohran gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I'm not leaving until I know you're safe." Kareem started the engine, the repaired cable holding steady, and pulled away slowly. As he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw Zohran standing alone under the flickering streetlight, solid, unmoving, watching the alley like a guardian. And in that moment, Kareem realized something profound. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was about standing up to it. Kareem drove through the neighborhood with trembling hands, glancing into the rearview mirror every few seconds. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, each block longer than the last. But behind him, Zohran remained in sight, standing alone under the streetlight, refusing to move until Kareem turned the distant corner. When Kareem finally reached the end of the avenue, he exhaled shakily and focused on the road ahead. Yet even as the car rolled forward, a pit grew in his stomach. No matter how far he drove, the fear felt glued to his skin. Meanwhile, Zohran remained behind, the only figure on an otherwise empty street. The flickering light cast long shadows around him. He stayed still for nearly a minute, listening, watching, waiting. Then he stepped toward the alley. The metallic sound could have been nothing, or it could have been the SUV men circling back. And Zohran Mamdani had never been the kind of man to walk away from danger when someone else might face it. As he approached the dark gap between buildings, the air shifted. It was subtle, just a faint murmur of movement, a presence. Zohran stopped, spine straightening. "If you're there," he said calmly into the darkness, "you don't need to hide." Silence. Then, a slow scrape echoed, almost taunting. Zohran took another step forward. "This is my district," he continued, voice steady. "And nobody intimidates people here, nobody." Suddenly, a figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. Not the tall man from the SUV, but someone slimmer, wearing a dark cap pulled low and a jacket zipped up to his chin. His stance was tense, predatory. "You talk too much," the stranger muttered. But Zohran didn't flinch. "You and your friends followed a man home for no reason," Zohran replied. "And you tried to scare him again outside a public meeting. That ends tonight." The stranger tilted his head. Bold words for someone standing alone. Zohran exhaled. "I'm not alone," he replied quietly. "My community stands with me. And the police, the council, the public, they're about to know everything you and your friends did tonight." The stranger scoffed. "You think anyone will care about your little speech?" But even as he said it, there was fear behind his bravado, fear of exposure, fear of consequences, fear of being dragged into the light. Zohran noticed. "You're afraid," he said. "Not of me, but of the truth." The stranger tensed, fists clenching. For a moment, Zohran wondered if he would lunge. But then another voice echoed from the far end of the alley, distant sirens growing louder. Someone must have reported the SUV earlier. The stranger cursed under his breath. "This isn't over." He retreated into the shadows, moving fast, disappearing into the maze of backpaths just as police lights reflected faintly on nearby windows. Zohran stepped out of the alley, his pulse steady despite the tension. He had walked into that darkness knowing it could have ended badly, but he walked out with something more powerful than fear, certainty. Certainty that the men stalking Kareem were rattled. Certainty that their cover was slipping. Certainty that what happened tonight would not be ignored. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Kareem," he asked when the line connected. "Did you get home?" Kareem's shaky voice answered, "Yes." "Doors locked?" "I'm inside." Zohran exhaled in relief. "Good. Listen carefully. What happened tonight, everything, is going to be reported. You're not alone in this. Do you hear me?" There was a long pause on the other end, then Kareem whispered, "I hear you." Zohran glanced back at the alley one last time. "Rest now. Tomorrow, we start fighting back." And for the first time since the car broke down, the night finally felt like it was turning in their favor. By morning, everything had changed. Kareem barely slept, replaying the night over and over, his car breaking down, the SUV, the men, the meeting, the confrontation in the alley. But when he woke, groggy and tense, he found something unexpected waiting on his phone, dozens of messages from people in the neighborhood. Invitations. Words of support. Offers to escort him to work. A voice memo from Mrs. Alvarado, the elderly lady who lived 2 doors down. "You're not alone, dear. We stand with you." Kareem listened to it twice, then 3 times. His chest tightened. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. And then, as if the universe wanted to underline the shift, his doorbell rang. When he opened it, Zohran stood there, coat still on, eyes tired but burning with purpose. "Get dressed," he said simply. "Today, we make sure no one else goes through what you did." They walked together through the neighborhood, but it didn't feel like the same place anymore. Word had spread quickly. Residents called out to Kareem with nods, waves, sympathetic smiles. "We heard what happened," someone said. "We got your back," another added. The day grew louder with solidarity, not suspicion. By the time they reached the community center, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors, local shop owners, elders, students, even off-duty nurses from the area hospital. They weren't angry. They weren't panicked. They were ready. Zohran took the lead, explaining the plan with the clarity and conviction that had defined his entire political life. "We're filing a formal complaint," he announced. "We're demanding an investigation into unlicensed groups patrolling our neighborhoods." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Kareem felt the shift again. People weren't standing around him, they were standing with him. The police precinct expected Zohran, but they did not expect him to show up flanked by an entire community. Officers straightened when he entered, recognizing the expression on his face, controlled, professional fury. "Assembly Member Mamdani," the captain said cautiously. "How can we help you?" Zohran placed a folder thick with Kareem's statement, witness accounts, video clips from neighbors' doorbell cameras, and a detailed timeline of the SUV's movements. "You can help," Zohran said, "by doing your job." The words hit the room with weight. Kareem stood silently at his side, hands clasped, but he didn't feel invisible. He felt powerful, not because he had authority, but because he finally had a voice amplified by many. The captain flipped through the file, his expression tightening with each page. "We'll investigate immediately," he said. "This is serious." Zohran nodded. "Yes," he replied. "It is." Hours later, as the sun began to set, the weight Kareem had carried for so long felt lighter, as if something in him had finally opened. He stood outside the precinct with Zohran, watching the city hum around them. "I don't know how to thank you," Kareem said softly. Zohran smiled, hands in his pockets. "Just promise me something," he replied. "The next time someone shouts for help, no matter who they are, you do exactly what you did before." Kareem exhaled, feeling emotion rise in his throat. "I will." Zohran nodded. "Good. Because community is a chain. Every link matters." They stood in quiet solidarity for a moment. Then Kareem started his car, the same engine they fixed together, and for the first time, he didn't hear a struggling machine, he heard resilience. As he drove away, Zohran watched from the sidewalk, the streetlight above him glowing steady and warm. And in that glow, Kareem realized something profound. He had come into the night afraid. But he walked out of it seen, supported, and unbroken. If you made it this far, subscribe, leave your like, and tell us where you're watching from. Thank you, and see you next time.